vampires have not really been in that many Goosebumps books. They're sometimes like mentioned, and maybe they make a brief appearance at the twist ending of a book, or something like that, but vampires and Goosebumps really have not appeared in that many Goosebumps books, except for two, and that is Vampire Breath and Please Don't Feed the Vampire. There are exceptions to this, like, I bet you there's a bunch of vampire stories in the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series, but those are only short stories and not really a main plotted Goosebumps book. Also, in Give Yourself Goosebumps, there probably are a couple of Goosebumps books that have vampires in them, but they're not the main focus of the book. Only Please Don't Feed the Vampire and Vampire Breath really focus solely on vampires. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, but I'm pretty sure those are the only vampire Goosebumps books that solely focus on vampires, unless they're, a short story or something like that. And so, lately, I've been doing some research on both of these books, and that's caused me to create a Goosebumps theory, and that is that the vampires in the Goosebumps universe are going to be at war. Okay, so it is at this point in time that I'm going to issue a spoiler warning. So, spoilers for Please Don't Feed the Vampire. Not really that much for that book. I'm mainly going to be talking about the main antagonist, Fifi the Vampire Poodle. And it's not really spoiling anything since, it's obviously on both the original cover and the reprint cover. But also, there's going to be some major spoilers for Vampire Breath, which is, I think, the 49th Goosebumps book in the original series. So if you haven't read those two books, then I would recommend you to not watch this video. But with that out of the way, guys, let's continue on to the topic of this video. So basically, in Vampire Breath, our main protagonist accidentally stumble upon this secret entryway, and they find this coffin. So our main protagonist and the main protagonist's friend who he's hanging out with, they open the coffin, and a bunch of stuff happens. I can't really remember all the stuff. I haven't read the book. And a little under a year, I believe, but basically, they encounter this vampire that's been asleep for 100 years named Count Nightwing. And so, Count Nightwing wants to suck their blood, but he needs vampire breath in order to do so. For those of you who do not know what vampire breath is basically what gives the vampires their powers in the Goosebumps universe. With the powers, it enhances their memory, it gives them fangs, it allows them to live. It's sort of like the vampires live and eating and stuff like that on blood, but they have to drink the vampire breath. And so, the main plot of this book involves our main protagonist's friend, trying to find the vampire breath before Count Nightwing does, so he won't suck their blood or something like that. Again, I can't really get on details because I haven't read the book in a little while, but pretty much they get sent back in time. They have to find his fangs, or no, his vampire breath. And so it's this huge chase scene, and it's a really great book. I love Vampire Breath. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it to you. But basically, they encounter this girl. This is going to be important later on in this video. But pretty much they encounter this girl in this one scene who claims to be a servant to the vampires. And so it really turns out that she's a vampire, wanting Count Nightwing's vampire breath so she could become the most powerful vampire and try to take over Count Nightwing's crown as King of the Vampires, because it turns out Count Nightwing is the most powerful vampire until he was asleep for 100 years. But this takes place 100 years ago, so, Count Nightwing is still alive. He's not asleep. And so, one thing leads to another. Count Nightwing gets his vampire breath, or something like that. But then, in a shocking turn of events, it is revealed that the main protagonist's family is actually related to Count Nightwing, and that is actually the main protagonist's grandfather. And so, basically, the whole family is vampires, including the main protagonist's mom and dad. And, that's pretty much the end of the book in the shocking turn of events. And I actually kind of enjoyed that twist. There's very few twists that I really enjoyed. I don't hate most of the twists in Goosebumps, actually. think they're fine, but there's a few twists that I really like, and this is one of the few. But pretty much, that's the end of the book. Also, in one scene, another twist, the main protagonist's friend encounters this thing called, like, werewolf's... It's not werewolf skin, but it's, like, werewolf balm. I'm so sorry, guys, I can't remember that plot twist at the end. Pretty much, she puts it on her skin, and she turns into a werewolf. That was sort of the plot twist. Another minor thing that I'm going to be talking about later on in my video, but that's pretty much the plot for Vampire Breath. And this has caused me to theorize from just looking at this plot that there could be a vampire war in the making. Because, just think about it. Count Nightwing has been asleep for 100 years. Who's become the Lord of the Vampires at that time? Naturally, I think the position would pass down to his daughter, or son, I can't really remember which one, but pretty much his heir to the throne, and so that would be the main protagonist's parents. And so that means they'd be the Lord of the Vampires in Count Nightwing's absence. And so now that he's back, how's this going to turn out? If they've become Lord of the Vampires, then what's Count Nightwing going to do? He's pretty much most likely going to try to regain his role as, the leader of the vampires, due to him being in the Goosebumps film, and pretty much being the only monster there, meaning that he's probably the most powerful being in the book. But he is sort of the main antagonistic force at the same time, so that's not really a huge piece of evidence. But, there should be some conflict between the two, because obviously the parents probably would not want to lose their seat of power, and Count Nightwing probably wants to gain his power back. After all, he does seem to be portrayed as sort of like a power-hungry Lord of the Vampires sort of thing in Vampire Breath. And so, I think this could create a war between the vampires. After all, the vampires do really want to take Count Nightwing's position. Because in the book, that little girl that I was talking about earlier, who wanted to get Count Nightwing's vampire breath, so she could become the most powerful vampire. You see, that was like her whole plot. And so it seems like there's a whole lot of rebellion against Count Nightwing, and a lot of people want to take his place as the Lord of the Vampires. So this would make sense also as further evidence for the main protagonist's parents to be, become Lord of the Vampires and them not wanting to give up their position. And again, as I said, this would create a whole war between Count Nightwing and the main protagonist's parents. And so, I think that is a huge piece of evidence with that little kid and stuff like that. But also, you can see it in Please Don't Feed the Vampire, because of this one fact. In the book, in one of the endings I found particularly annoying, basically, you complete all the tasks in the book in one of the paths, but then you get bit by a vampire mosquito. And that is physically impossible for it to happen. In the plot of Please Don't Feed the Vampire, your dog, considering which path you take, the dog will become a vampire and it will go to this pet store, where we will buy all the pets in the store and all the stuff. So a lot of this great stuff happens that I'm not going to get into detail in, but pretty much it ends with all the vampire animals being captured, and Fifi is no longer a vampire, I believe, or something like that. But then, in the shocking twist, you get bit by a vampire mosquito. This is implied to be from Fifi's bite, but just think about it. Fifi's a dog. And why would she, or he, I can't really remember which one, bite a mosquito? You can't just bite a mosquito and the mosquito lives. That really doesn't make any sense. The mosquito's body would be squashed to bits if it was bit by a dog and become a vampire. It wouldn't survive that. So I would believe that this means that is from the war between the vampires. Because if you take a look at Vampire Breath, you know that little girl that I was talking about before? Count Nightwing disposes of her by turning her into an insect. And this could be the same case. People who want to take, it seems like, Count Nightwing's place as Lord of the Vampires, gets turned into insects. This would easily explain why there is a vampire mosquito in Please Don't Feed the Vampire. And so that means that it was most likely a victim of the war between the vampires on Count Nightwing's side and the main protagonist's parents' side. And maybe that could be the main protagonist or the main protagonist's parents, you know. And also further evidence to prove that the parents are Lord of the Vampires and all that stuff is that bottle of that werewolf stuff. I can't remember what it is. I keep wanting to say werewolf skin, but that's from another Goosebumps book, and I don't believe that was in there. But that would be cool, though, if it was werewolf skin, even though it pretty much is not. So, anyways, that is further evidence, though, because they got the werewolf stuff, and so usually vampires and Lord of the Vampires and stuff like that are pretty much portrayed as sort of your Lord of the Darkness sort of thing. I think that's what they call Dracula and stuff like that. Lord of the Darkness, Lord of the Creatures of the Night and stuff like that. And so it makes sense for the main protagonist's parents to have that werewolf stuff. Because, you know, they're the Lord of the Darkness, which means they most likely have a bunch of supernatural items inside their house. And also, think about it. Count Nightwing's tomb is magically in the main protagonist's house in this secret entryway. I believe that, you know, the parents sort of forgot about their grandfather or something like that. I can't remember why they didn't awaken Count Nightwing, because they basically had the perfect opportunity. Maybe they were searching for his body or something like that. I think that's what they said, or they didn't know he was buried in this house. But isn't that a coincidence, though, that he is in their house? And they had the power to bring back to life Count Nightwing. Not bring back to life, but, you know, awaken him from sleep. But they didn't. I think this means that they want to keep their role as Lord of the Vampires. And now that he's awake, this will create a whole entire war. And so I believe, though, that Count Nightwing would be victorious. After all, just look at, like, I think the Goosebumps movie tie-in, that was the Goosebumps Monster Survival Guide. In that book, believe it stated that Fifi was Count Nightwing's pet dog. Fifi, if you see Please Don't Feed the Vampire, was created more in modern times. And so and Count Nightwing most likely would either be asleep or dead if he lost the vampire war. So the fact that he gets a pet vampire who is in the modern times, then that means that most likely he won the war. And also there's a vampire mosquito, which hints at the fact that most likely he won the war due to him turning one of the vampires into a mosquito, most likely the one who's taken or is trying to take his power away, which could be the main protagonist's parents. But anyway, guys, that's the end of my theory. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, comment down below what you guys think. Do you think that there's a vampire war brewing inside the Goosebumps universe, or do you think that Count Nightwing's just going to assume his rightful place as Lord of the Vampires? Comment down below what you guys think. And anyway, guys, I believe that's the end of my video.